Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about using an IP in a different medium. And this is what I mean specifically is by IP is a license to an intellectual property. Maybe it was a tabletop role-playing game, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a movie. For me, it would be making a game from that, and I have a whole video on converting movies into games, and there's a link below. But it's a similar process. This using an IP in a different medium is a similar process that TV shows or movies go through when they try to convert a book or a game into their medium. And I'm not talking about the Fallout TV show here. There's a link below if you want to read what I thought of it. Spoiler, I liked it. What I want to talk about is the ways in which it can go wrong converting an IP to a new medium. And I've done a few games based on IPs. Temple of Elemental Evil, Vampire Bloodlines, South Park, The Stick of Truth. So I have done games based on the licensed property of someone else. So I kind of know how that can go. Some of those went well. Some of those didn't go as well. Let's talk about that. And I'm going to pull out, because I've already talked about this, and the link is below. I've already talked about how hard it is to maintain an IP, and because of lore drift and other things across DLC and sequels, it's hard enough to make multiple games using one IP. And we all know, I'm sure you can think of it, I'm sure you can think of a game or a book or a movie where you liked the first one, and maybe the second one, and then the third one, you're like, huh? And by the fourth or the fifth one, you're like, This is normal. Sometimes it's you getting worn out, or it's the game is going in a direction you didn't expect it to go, or the books or the movies. They're going in a direction you didn't think it would go. They're still being true to themselves. It's just once you get a few points, you know the direction that line is going, and maybe you wanted to go here, and instead it's going here. But there are some that you can probably go, I don't like this. This is not for me. I don't like the direction it's going. We all know about stuff like that. So let's talk about 3 ways that converting an IP to a new medium can go wrong. Because as you know, I think the best way to learn is from failure. So talking about how it can go wrong teaches us more than talking about how it can go right. In fact, I have a whole video on that. There's a link below about learning from failure. There's a lot of links in this one. First of all, let's talk about the first way that converting an IP to a new medium can go bad. Maybe the new thing you make isn't very good. And by that, of course, people keep calling out because you said there's no bad games, but then you say something's bad. And I mean it's bad for me, or the popular vote it's bad. Keep in mind, there are people who like it. And you know this is true. You know there are some shows that have come out recently that have been panned by so many people and so many critics and so many fans. I'm looking at a few TV shows that came out recently. But guess what? There are people who like them. Guess what? Their IMDb ratings are not 0. There are people who like them. There are people who defend them. I've learned not to bring up certain TV shows to my friends because they like them. Where I went, that was the most hideous monstrosity I've ever seen in my life. But they liked it. So I let them like it. It's called don't yuck their yum. I like that phrase. Anyway, but there are times where the new thing is bad, and it's bad not related to the IP or how well they represented the IP. So that's the first way it can go bad. You can see this in a game. Like, let's say you're trying to play a game and it crashes a lot, or it runs slow, or it has a UI that you don't like. At that point, it doesn't matter if it's a licensed game. You don't like that game, and it's not because of the IP. It's completely independent of it. You think it's a bad game. So it's irrelevant what the IP was. In TV shows and movies, you see this when people go, well, that was a really bad script, or couldn't stand the dialogue, or man, that acting was horrible. Or they had, if you're an artist, excuse me, the dog is making me sneeze. If you're an artist, sometimes you look at something and go, that spaceship model is terrible. Those special effects are terrible. That robot looks terrible. I don't like this movie. Sometimes it's something like that. And maybe it's just such a low budge or low quality or whatever, and you just can't get over that And so you think it's a bad movie, even though you may like the IP it's based on. So that's the first way it can go bad, the whole transfer of medium. If the underlying new product isn't very good from your standards, it doesn't matter about the IP. But then there's two other ways that a new thing can go bad because of the IP. The first one is if the new thing diverges too much from the IP. Now, you have to recognize that whenever you change something to a new medium, you have to make changes. One of the biggest problems I have, and I'll talk about it later, is I think I too slavishly followed Temple of Elemental Evil when I converted it from a tabletop module to a video game. But this should be obvious to anyone who's ever tried to do it. A book tells you things, but a movie has to show it. The book may leave things vague, but there are things you have to show. If a book never mentions how tall a character is, you can't avoid showing that character and maybe having him stand in a doorway or next to another character. You have to show that character, show how tall they are. So that's a decision you have to make, even though the book never says anything about it. So there are decisions you have to make that the book may leave vague. However, some new products diverge so much from the original IP that they seem to lose the essence of what was important about that IP. It's when you find yourself watching a TV show, say, and you're like, based on a book that you read, and you go, that character would never say that. That character would never do that. Or that event never happened. If you have that reaction, that is because if you've read the book and now you're watching a TV show or a movie based on it, and you're like, this diverges from what I consider to be important points of the book. Now, this can happen when the show itself is really good. I saw a TV show recently that was based on a book series that I absolutely love, but it diverged so much. And it had good acting, it had good special effects, good scripts, sort of. It just diverged too much. And I didn't like it, even though a lot of my friends liked it. And the first thought in my head was, why didn't they just make an original movie or an original TV show? Why are they basing it on an existing IP and then massively changing characters, timelines, events? What I consider to be the underlying theme of the book is not even present in the new thing. In this case, it was a TV show. It not only is not present, but there's a new theme ever present that wasn't in the book. And I'm just like, they're trying to say something that's personal to them that wasn't in the book. Why not just make an original IP? And some people go, well, because, you get a lot of the fans. I'm like, yeah, but you also risk making those fans angry. So I don't get that. And I'm on record as saying I prefer making my own IP. So I'm a little biased that way. But now let's talk about the third way that a new product that's based on an IP can be considered bad. And that is because it follows too closely the IP. There are things that have to change when you change medium. When you go from a tabletop art module to a video game, you lose that human GM. You have to make decisions that every GM makes on the spot. When you make a movie or a TV show based on a book, there are sometimes characters that have to be merged together because you're trying to show it all in 2 hours and it may be a 400-page book. So sometimes characters are merged or timelines are compressed or some areas are cut because you just don't have time to show the other area, or you don't have the budget to show that many different areas because, a book writer can say, then they went to the dungeon, then they went to the desert, then they went to the mountain very easily. But if you're trying to show all those in a TV show or a movie, that's a huge budget. Now, I love the Lord of the Rings movies, but I know when they came out, they were called out for giving dialogue that were in the book belonged to some characters to different characters. And I thought that worked. I thought that the movie flowed better because they did that. But more importantly, the theme of Lord of the Rings comes across in the movies, which is, absolute power corrupts, and it doesn't matter how good-hearted you are, it doesn't matter what your intent is. If given absolute power, you will become corrupted. Gandalf says it. Galadriel says it. We watch it happen to Frodo. So I love that was maintained. Now, when you're trying to make a game or a product based on an IP, in my case, it was when I tried to make a video game based on Temple of Elemental Evil, there's a lot of disagreements on what to change. I wanted to keep everything as rigidly close as possible, and that may have been a mistake. But there are still disagreements. There are people who wanted us to change it to real time. And I'm like, but D&D is turn-based. To convert it to real time means it's not just, boom, it's real time. There is so much based on the fact that it is turn-based. When it is my turn, nothing is moving. I can determine a tactical analysis of the battlefield and shoot off a fireball, and I know we'll hit exactly these things. I can shoot a lightning bolt, and I know how things are lined up, and I know I will hit them. All that goes out the window when you go real time. Plus, you then have to change rules about how often do people attack, and what is initiative in a real-time game. So there's all that stuff that has to change. But the thing is, if you try to do the conversion and not make any changes, even if you're trying to turn a book into a movie or a book into a TV show, and you try to not change anything at all about it, you're probably going to fail. This is where I think Temple had some failures. Even if you look past my bad writing, I think I did bad writing. There's bad dialogue in Temple. But if I were to do it today, there are a lot of changes I would make. I would try to make Hamlet a more exciting village. I'd have more events happening there. I'd have more things going on, dramatic stuff, more quests you could pick up, more things for the player to do. Nuln would have all of its content restored because the village of Nuln got a lot of content deleted. And then I would do a lot more Temple storyline that was both personal to the priests and creatures that were inside the temple, but also have some of them coming out. For example, here's something that I wanted to do, and I never had a chance to do it. I wanted there to be a lower priest in the Earth Temple who, when the player party shows up, he actually intercepts you and he goes, hey, if you do something for me, I can give you keys, I can explain where things are, I can give you safe passage, but you got to do one thing for me. And they're like, what is it? Like, kill the high priest. Now, this, of course, depends on what kind of party you're playing. But if you succeed in killing the high priest, he wins, knowing he will now be promoted. He's one step closer to running the temple. But if you die in the attempt, he'll just shrug it off. If you're caught and still alive, he'll just deny knowing you. And unbeknownst to you, he's already set up an alibi for where he was when you claim to have met him. So he's got all that thought out. What I like about this is it can unroll in so many ways, depending on what the players do and what kind of characters the player has made. Is he trying to be nice? Is there a paladin in the party? Is there an assassin in the party? Other ideas included having people in Nuln more obviously connected to the temple, and there are quests that take you back and forth, and maybe even having temple agents in Hamlet that were more obvious, because there were some, but real obvious, and quests involved in it, and stuff that really got the player involved. Now, why would I want to do this? Because getting the player involved makes it a much more personal story to the player. It's way more interesting. And also, I missed some of the reactivity that were in all of my other games. I wanted the game to have quests that were resolvable in lots of different ways. Even though combat is very much foremost in D&D, and I did not want to lose that. I wanted all those skills that were present in D&D 3.5 to have utility as well. Because I did not want to lose the essence of what was D&D 3.5. But because I was so devoted to that, I think I was too slavishly devoted to exactly what was in the printed module. And I think the game suffered. Independent of the bugs, independent of writing, it suffered for that devotion. So, what's my takeaway on this? Be very careful if you're using an IP in a new medium. There are many ways that you can mess that up. In addition to just making a bad new product, you can be too devoted to the IP, or you can diverge too much from the IP's basic themes. In fact, there are so many ways to mess up. You might want to ask yourself, do you really want this IP? Do you want to be using it? It may not be your choice, but if it is your choice, ask yourself, why am I doing this rather than just making something original? And if your only answer is, well, I'm hoping to bring the fans on board, keep in mind you're also risking pissing off an entire fan base. Personally, for me, I'd rather make an original IP.